So I've got my pattern pieces all cut out here. One of the steps that I recommend that you take before starting this project is to finish your raw edges on your pattern pieces. Now you don't have to finish all of them, but I recommend that you do at least what I'm going to show you here in a second, because there are some steps that'll make it a little challenging for you to finish the raw edges once it's been sewn together. And the goal here is for you to always have a beautiful garment on the inside and the outside. So I would recommend that you finish the raw edges all the way around your pockets. The bottom, just your facing, your back facing, the bottom of the back facing, the bottom of the front facing, and along the front and the back. So this will apply to both. You'll finish that shoulder seam and that underarm seam all the way to that opening. We're not going to do the opening because we're going to sew a narrow hem here, and the tie extensions are going to be folded, so we don't need to do that. So you'll just sew one, finish the raw edges right under the underarm seam all the way down to that straight edge, okay? And again, that applies to both the front and the back pieces. So once you've done that, let's grab your pockets. I'm going to put my basings out of the way. Grab your pockets and either your front or your back. I'm going to start on my front. And right side together. Move my back out of the way. And right side together, I'm going to grab a pocket. And we're going to attach it at the side seam. And you know, I like to pin as much as possible so that we reduce that back and forth going to the sewing machine. So I'm going to do the front and the back. And if you're working with the printed version of this pattern, I apologize, but the pocket bag pattern did not come with a notch on it. What you're going to do is place the top edge of your pocket about a half an inch above that notch. So when you place that pocket bag along the side seam notch, it's going to align about a half an inch above and a half an inch below those notches. Okay, so we've got those pinned, and now we need to go to the sewing machine. We're going to sew these pockets, half of these pocket bags, to the side seam at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm using white thread this time. Most times on my sew-alongs I'll use a contrasting thread, but I'm actually going to keep this version. And if you follow me on Instagram, you know I have a pet peeve. I do not like to wear pieces that the thread does not match. But I do have a brown thread in the bobbin, so you will end up seeing where my stitching is. 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go to your iron and press your seam allowance towards the pocket like I've already done here. And then we are going to align our front to back right sides together. And we're going to pin all along that side seam around the pocket bag. and up to the underarm. I really like this dress because you don't have to take the time to set in a sleeve. It's a nice, easy fit. Okay, I'm gonna show you how this looks. This is my side seam. And we've pinned from the other underarm around the pocket down to the end. And we're gonna do that on the other side. Now we're also going to pin along that top shoulder seam. So here's my neckline, and here's my shoulder. It's like a shoulder sleeve combination. And now we're going to the sewing machine. We're going to sew all of these seams at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Head to your ironing board and press all of these seams flat. So here are your 2 side ties, and this is the opening at the side of your dress, and here is your side seam. We are going to work just in this space here, but we're going to turn about 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to turn another 1/4 of an inch. So you should be seeing folded edges. You should not be seeing any raw edges. So with your dress facing right side up, you're going to take your tie extensions and fold them along the fold line, which is along the length right side together. and pin. You're going to pin along the tie extensions only. And then we're going to do the same thing to the remaining piece. And you're looking at it right side up. Move that to the side, grab your facings and right side together. We're going to sew right across that shoulder seam. And we're going to take all of this to the sewing machine. So now I'm starting to sew those short edges of my facings. For the tie extensions, we're only going to sew along the short edge, the long edge, and we're going to stop where this tie meets that narrow hem that we just sewed. Once you're finished, take your scissors and trim your seam allowance just along the seams that you've sewn. Now turn your dress right side out and we are going to sew the facing to the neckline. So align the facing around the neckline, right side spacing, and pin. You can align those shoulder seams together. And once you've got it pinned, we're going to sew all the way around. So once you finish sewing around the neckline, grab your scissors and you're going to cut that V to your stitching, but not through it, okay? And then you can trim that seam allowance down along the sides. And then continue to trim the rest of your seam allowance. You'll also want to take your scissors and about every inch or so, you're going to clip into your seam allowance to the stitching line, not through it, don't break the stitching line, but to your stitching line about every 1 inch all the way around. Then from there, let's make sure that seam allowance is pushed towards your facing to the right. And from the right side of your fabric, we are going to understitch. And we're going to understitch about 1/8 of an inch away to the right of this seam line. Still working from the right side, we're going to fold our facing inside. And at the shoulder seam, from the right side, we're going to stitch in the ditch. And that is simply a technique in which we are sewing inside of a seam line that we've already sewn. So we're going to place our needle right in that seam line, and it's going to catch our facing on the inside so that the facing doesn't flip up on us. We're just securing it. And we're going to do that on both shoulder seams. And you may want to go slowly on this because you don't, to have a clean finish on the outside, you don't want to see a stitching line on the outside. You want to make sure that needle is hitting right inside that seam that we've already sewn. And you're going to sew just for the length of the facing. Okay? That was a pretty good one. Let me show you. So go ahead and take 2 of your straps and turn them right side out like I've done here. And then you'll see that you still have some raw edge here on the bottom of your dress. So what you're going to do is turn that down about 1/2 inch and press. And then you're going to repeat this on the other set of straps, ties, your tie extensions. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine, and then from the right side of the dress, you are going to top stitch along the area that we just pressed. So the area that we just pressed on the inside, you're going to flip it on the other side, and you're going to top stitch a nice row to close that up. And then you just do the same on the remaining tie extensions that you have. So the last thing that we have to do is the sleeves. We're going to fold up about 1/4 inch. And then we're going to fold a larger turn, about 1 inch. And we're going to sew. And just repeat this on your remaining sleeve. Snip all those threads. Make sure you've given it a good press. And go ahead and sew in a label if you want to. And you're all done with Erin View B.